The Torian estate sprawled across 50 acres of pristine landscape, its security systems among the most advanced in the sector. Cale paced his study like a caged predator, the device Lyrics had given him sitting on his desk like an accusation, for 6 hours. He'd been wrestling with the decision to activate it. His father's words echoed in his memory. "Trust is a luxury we can't afford, son. Everyone wants something from us." But Lyricus hadn't asked for credits, hadn't requested a loan or investment. She'd asked for his help and warned him about a threat he hadn't seen coming. Finally, Cale activated the device. The holographic display that emerged made his blood turn to ice. Financial records stretching back 5 years showed a pattern of corporate takeovers followed by accidents. The hegemony would approach successful mining operations with partnership offers, then systematically eliminate their leadership within months. Explosions, transport crashes, poisoning, all made to look like industrial accidents or natural disasters. But it was the environmental data that truly shook him. Thyros Prime, once a thriving world of crystal forests and bioluminescent oceans, now looked like a scarred wasteland. The images showed strip mining operations that had poisoned the water table, toxic waste dumps that glowed with radioactive signatures, and mass graves where the hegemony had disposed of protesters. "My God," Cale whispered, his hands trembling, as he scrolled through the data. A soft chime from his security system interrupted his horror. Someone was at his gate, someone who'd bypassed the first 3 security checkpoints without triggering an alarm. "Sir," his security chief's voice crackled through the intercom. "We have an unauthorized visitor, female, requesting to speak with you urgently. She says her name is Lyrics Vandera." Cale's pulse quickened. "Let her through." Minutes later, Lyrics stood in his study, but she looked nothing like the polished socialite from the club. Her expensive dress was torn, her hair disheveled, and a thin line of blood traced down her left cheek. "You opened it," she said, nodding toward the still-active holographic display. "You're hurt." Cale moved toward her, but she waved him off. "Vex's people found my safe house. I barely got out." She collapsed into a chair, exhaustion finally showing through her composure. "They know I've been gathering evidence, but they don't know I've shared it with you, yet. How many people know about this? On my side. 3 others, all off-world. The hegemony has been very careful to eliminate anyone who gets too close to the truth." Lyrics looked up at him, her green eyes fierce despite her injuries. "I've been planning this for 3 years, Cale. Tracking their operations, documenting their crimes. You're the first person with enough resources and political connections to actually do something about it." Cale sat across from her, his mind reeling. "Why me, specifically?" "Because you're not just wealthier, respected. The consortium has a reputation for ethical business practices. If you expose the hegemony's crimes, people will listen." She leaned forward, wincing slightly. "And because you're powerful, enough that they can't just make you disappear without consequences. They're trying to kill me tomorrow night. Not trying, they will kill you. The negotiation is a sham. They've already prepared the documents to claim the consortium as compensation for their investment in your company. Your death will be recorded as a tragic accident during the celebration dinner." Cale stood, pacing to the window that overlooked his grounds. In the distance, he could see the lights of New Viridian, unaware that their golden age of prosperity was built on the bones of murdered worlds. "What's your real name?" he asked quietly. "Lyrics Vandera." That part was true. She was silent for a moment. "I was a xenobiologist on Thyros Prime. I studied the crystal forests, the way they purified the atmosphere and supported entire ecosystems. I was working on a project to replicate their process on other worlds when the hegemony arrived. Your family, dead, along with 11 billion others." Her voice was steady, but Cale could hear the weight of grief beneath it. The hegemony said they were bringing progress, prosperity. Instead, they brought death. Kale turned back to her. The fortune hunting, that was all an act. A bitter smile crossed her lips. I needed to get close to the colony's elite, to understand the power structures. Pretending to be a social climber was the perfect cover. No one suspects a gold digger of being a revolutionary. Revolutionary. What else would you call someone trying to overthrow a genocidal corporate empire? Lyric stood, moving to stand beside him at the window. I know what you're thinking, Kale. You're wondering if this is all some elaborate con. If I'm playing a longer game than you realized. She was right. That's exactly what he was thinking. But looking at her now, seeing the pain in her eyes when she spoke of her lost world, Kale found himself believing her. Show me, he said. Show you what? Everything. The other safe houses. Your contacts, your escape routes. If we're going to stop the hegemony, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Lyric studied his face for a long moment. You believe me, I believe the evidence, and I believe you're not the person I thought you were. Kale moved to his desk, pulling out a secure communication device. My security chief is former military intelligence. If we're going to survive tomorrow night, we'll need his help. Kale Lyric's voice was soft, almost vulnerable. Thank you. He looked at hurriedly, looked at her and saw not the scheming socialite he'd dismissed, but a survivor carrying the weight of an entire world's destruction. Thank me after we're both still alive. But as he began making calls to his most trusted advisors, Kale realized something had fundamentally changed. For the first time in his life, he was fighting for something larger than profit margins and market share. He was fighting for justice. The hegemony's flagship, Dominion's Edge, hung in orbit above New Viridian, like a steel predator. From the observation deck of the Meridian Tower, Kale watched the shuttle carrying Vex Moradin and his delegation descend toward the spaceport. In 6 hours, they would meet for what the hegemony believed would be his final negotiation. Nervous, Lyrics asked, her reflection joining his in the reinforced transparisteel. Terrified, Kale admitted. She'd spent the morning in his medical bay, having her injuries treated by his personal physician. Now she looked every inch the elegant socialite again, but Kale could see the tension in her shoulders. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. She moved to stand beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something exotic and floral that reminded him of the crystal forests in her holographic records. My contact on Arcturus Station confirmed that Fey Hegemony has already started liquidating consortium assets in the Outer Rim. They're not waiting for your death to begin the takeover. Kale's jaw tightened. How many of my people, 37 mining stations, gone dark in the last 48 hours? The hegemony is claiming technical difficulties, but satellite imagery shows hegemony ships at every location. Hundreds of workers, Kale's hands clenched into fists. His father had always preached that their employees were family, not just numbers on a profit sheet. We have to stop this. We will. Lyrics' voice carried absolute conviction. But first, we need you to survive the night. Kale's security chief, Torvin Blacksteel, approached with military precision. The grizzled veteran had served in 3 colonial wars before joining the consortium, and his tactical expertise had already proven invaluable. The venue is secure, Torvin reported. We've swept the Celestial Dining Hall 3 times. No explosives, no toxins, no obvious assassination devices. But sir, with respect, this feels like a trap within a trap, meaning, they're expecting us to expect an attack. Vex Moradin isn't stupid. He knows you might be suspicious. So he's made the obvious threats too obvious. Torvin pulled up a holographic blueprint of the restaurant. My guess? They're planning something we can't detect yet. Lyric studied the layout. What about the other patrons? The Celestial is exclusive, but it's not private. That's what worries me, Torvin admitted. Moradin specifically requested a public venue. He wants witnesses. Kale felt ice form in his stomach. He wants people to see me die, or see you agree to something that will kill you later. Lyrics said quietly, "What if the assassination isn't immediate? What if they're planning to make you complicit in your own destruction?" Before anyone could answer, Kale's communication device chimed with an encrypted message. The sender was listed as friend of Theros. "It's from one of my contacts," Lyric said, her face going pale as she read. "The hegemony didn't just kill the workers at your mining stations. They're using the facilities to process something called Nectar 9. Never heard of it. It's a combat stimulant. Highly addictive. Turns soldiers into berserkers who feel no pain. The hegemony has been using it to control populations on conquered worlds." Lyric's voice was tight with rage. "They're not just stealing your assets there, turning them into drug manufacturing facilities." Torvin's expression darkened. "Sir, this changes everything. If they're already using your facilities for illegal production, they can claim you're complicit. Your death becomes a matter of justice, rather than assassination." "Frame me posthumously," Kale realized. "Brilliant and ruthless. Which means they'll have evidence planted at the restaurant," Lyric said. "Something that implicates you in the Nectar 9 operation. They kill you, discover the evidence, and claim the consortium as restitution for damages." Kale moved to his desk, pulling up the consortium's financial records. How long would it take to transfer core assets to offshore accounts? Legally, weeks. Illegally, Torvin shrugged. With the right connections, maybe hours. Do it. Everything we can move without triggering automatic alerts. Kale's mind was racing now, seeing the scope of the hegemony's plan. If they want to play dirty, we'll give them a taste of their own medicine. "Sir," Torvin's voice carried a warning. "If we're caught moving assets before the meeting, it'll look like we knew about the planned assassination. That could be interpreted as an act of war. The hegemony already committed acts of war when they murdered my people," Kale said coldly. "We're just evening the odds." Lyrics placed a hand on his arm. "Kale, there's something else. The message mentioned that Vex Moradin isn't the only hegemony operative on New Viridian. They've been placing sleeper agents in colonial governments. 4 years. How many? Unknown. But they might have people in your security detail, your government contacts, even your medical staff." She looked at Torvin apologetically. "No offense, but we can't trust anyone except each other." Torvin nodded grimly. "None taken. In Black Ops, paranoia is a survival trait." Kale felt the weight of isolation settling over him. For his entire life, he'd been surrounded by advisors, security personnel, and business associates. Now he realized that any one of them could be a hegemony plant. "So we go in alone," he said. "Not alone." Lyrics' smile was predatory. "We go in prepared." She pulled out a small device similar to the one she'd given him at the club, but this one was smaller, more refined. "This is a quantum recorder. It'll capture everything: audio, video, biometric data, even trace chemical signatures. If they try to poison you, frame you, or plant evidence, we'll have proof. And if they just shoot me, then the recording will be transmitted automatically to every major news network in the sector." Lyrics' eyes glittered with determination. "Vex Moradin wants to make your death public. We'll give him more publicity than he bargained for." Kale took the device, feeling its weight barely heavier than a credit chip, but carrying the power to expose a conspiracy that spanned multiple star systems. "There's no going back after tonight," he said. "There was no going back after Thyros Prime," Lyrics replied. "The hegemony declared war on innocent worlds long ago. Tonight, we just start fighting back." As the sun set over New Viridian painting, the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Kale prepared for the most dangerous dinner of his life. But for the first time in days, he wasn't afraid. He was angry. And anger, he was learning, was a much more useful emotion than fear. The celestial dining hall floated 200 meters above New Viridian's surface, its transparent walls offering a breathtaking view of the city's glittering lights. Kale arrived precisely on time, his formal attire concealing both the quantum recorder and a small personal defense weapon Torvin had insisted he carry. Vex Moradin was already waiting, his smile as sharp as a blade. The hegemony enforcer had chosen a table near the center of the restaurant, ensuring maximum visibility for whatever spectacle he had planned. Kale, my friend. Vex rose to embrace him, his voice warm with false camaraderie. You look well. Prosperity suits you. Thank you for coming to New Viridian personally, Kale replied, accepting the embrace while mentally cataloging the other. Diners, 12 tables, 23 patrons, 6 staff members. Any one of them could be part of the conspiracy. I wouldn't miss it. The hegemony values personal relationships. Vex gestured to the chair across from him. Please, sit. I've taken the liberty of ordering wine, a bottle of Centauri Red, aged 50 years. Perfect for celebrating our new partnership. Kale sat, noting that the wine had already been opened and poured. The glasses sat on the table like twin goblets of blood. You're confident our negotiations will succeed. I'm confident in the wisdom of successful businessmen. Vex raised his glass to the future of mining in the Outer Rim. The quantum recorder was already capturing everything: the wine's chemical signature, Vex's biometric readings, even the subtle electromagnetic signatures of any hidden devices. If there was poison in the wine, Lyrics would know within minutes. Kale raised his glass but didn't drink. I have to admit, your offer is almost too good to be true. Guaranteed security, expanded markets, political protection. What does the hegemony gain from this partnership? Stability, order, progress. Vex's eyes never left Kale's face. The Outer Rim is chaos, my friend. Pirates, revolutionaries, terrorist cells. Your mining operations are vulnerable. We offer protection. Protection from whom? The same people who destroyed the Valdris Corporation. The same terrorists who bombed the Nexus mining platform. The same revolutionaries who've been spreading lies about the hegemony's expansion efforts. Vex leaned forward. Drink, Kale. The wine is excellent. Kale lifted the glass to his lips, pretending to sip while keeping his mouth closed. The wine smelled normal, but he'd learned not to trust his senses when dealing with the hegemony. Tell me about these terrorists, Kale said. Dangerous individuals. Criminals masquerading as freedom fighters. Vex finally took a drink from his own glass. There's one in particular, a woman named Lyrics Van. She's been spreading propaganda about the hegemony's operations, trying to incite rebellion among the mining colonies. Kale's blood ran cold, but he kept his expression neutral. I've heard the name. Isn't she some kind of socialite? A cover? Identity? In reality, she's a saboteur, an assassin. We have evidence that she's been infiltrating colonial high society, seducing wealthy men to gain access to their resources. Vex's smile was poisonous. She's dangerous, Kale. If she ever approaches you, you must contact us immediately. Of course. Kale pretended to take another sip of wine. What kind of evidence? Financial records showing payments from revolutionary cells. Communication logs proving she's coordinated attacks on hegemony facilities. Even holographic recordings of her admitting to murder. Vex reached into his jacket, withdrawing a datapad. We've prepared a complete briefing for you. After all, as our partner, you'll need to know about all potential threats. Kale accepted the datapad, his skin crawling as he realized the sophistication of the frame job. The hegemony hadn't just planned to kill him, they'd prepared to destroy Lyrics' credibility simultaneously. This is very thorough, Kale said, scrolling through the fabricated evidence. But I'm curious, how did you gather so much intelligence on one woman? We've been tracking her for months. She's been getting close to several prominent business leaders, always using the same tactics. Seduce them, gain their trust, then steal their resources to fund terrorist activities. Vex's voice dropped to a whisper. In fact, we have reason to believe she might target you next. Me, you're wealthy, influential, and have access to mining facilities she could use for terrorist purposes. The pattern fits perfectly. Vex leaned back, his expression grave, which is why we need to act quickly. Sign the partnership agreement tonight, and we can provide immediate protection. Kale felt the trap closing around him. If he signed the agreement, he'd be voluntarily handing over his assets to the hegemony. If he refused, they'd kill him and claim he was working with terrorists. This is all very concerning, Kale said. Perhaps I should increase my security measures before making any major decisions. Security measures won't help against someone like Lyrax Vendara. She's not just a terrorist, she's a master manipulator. She could probably convince you that the hegemony is the real threat, that we're the ones planning to kill you. Vex laughed, but there was no humor in it. It's what she does, turns truth into lies, allies into enemies. The quantum recorder was capturing every word, every gesture. Kale could only hope that Lyrax was monitoring the transmission and preparing their counterattack. She sounds formidable, Kale said. She is, which is why we need to eliminate her before she can cause more damage. Vex pulled out another device, a small tablet showing what appeared to be surveillance footage. Actually, we believe she's already on New Viridian. Our intelligence suggests she might even be here, in this restaurant, tonight. Kale's heart nearly stopped. Here, it would be the perfect opportunity for her, a public venue, prominent target, maximum impact. Vex stood, scanning the other diners. In fact, I'm going to have my security team sweep the building. We can't be too careful. As if summoned by his words, 3 hegemony agents entered the restaurant. Kale recognized their type immediately: cold, efficient, utterly ruthless. They began moving through the dining room, checking each table with professional thoroughness. Vex, Kale said carefully, perhaps we should postpone this meeting. If there's really a terrorist threat, nonsense. This is exactly when we need to stand together against the forces of chaos. Vex raised his wine glass again. Drink with me, Kale. Show these terrorists that we won't be intimidated. Kale lifted his glass, his mind racing. The hegemony agents were getting closer, and he could see them focusing on the female diners. They were hunting for Lyrax, and if they found her, both their lives would be forfeit. But as he brought the wine to his lips, Kale noticed something that made his blood freeze. Vex's glass was nearly full, while his own was supposedly half empty from the sips he'd been pretending to take. Vex hadn't been drinking his wine either. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Wine was poisoned, and Vex had been waiting for Kale to consume enough to be affected. But that meant the poison was slow-acting, designed to seem like a natural heart attack or stroke. Kale set down his glass with deliberate care. Actually, I think I've had enough wine for one evening. Vex's smile faltered. Come now, don't be rude. One more toast to the death of our enemies. The words carried a double meaning that made Kale's skin crawl. But before he could respond, a commotion erupted from the kitchen. Shouts, the sound of breaking glass, and then the lights went out, in the darkness. Kale heard Vex's sharp intake of breath, and the scrape of chairs, as other diners began to panic. Emergency lighting flickered on, bathing the restaurant in an eerie red glow. Stay calm, Vex called out, but his voice carried an edge of tension. I'm sure it's just a power fluctuation. But Kale could see the hegemony agents moving with purpose now, their weapons drawn. This wasn't part of their plan. Something had gone wrong, and in the chaos, he caught a glimpse of flame-red hair disappearing into the service corridor. Lyrax had made her move. The emergency lighting cast dancing shadows across the restaurant as hegemony agents secured the exits. Kale remained seated, projecting calm, while his mind raced through possibilities. The quantum recorder was still transmitting, capturing every moment of the unfolding crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, Vex's voice cut through the murmur of frightened diners. Please remain in your seats. We're experiencing a minor technical difficulty. But Kale could see the truth in the enforcer's movements. Vex was coordinating with his agents through subtle hand signals, and their formation was distinctly military. This wasn't crowd control, it was a combat operation. A server approached their table, her movements graceful despite the chaos. "Sir, the kitchen apologizes for the disturbance. Perhaps you'd like to move to a more secure location." Kale looked up at her and felt his heart skip. It was Lyrics, disguised in the restaurant's uniform, her red hair hidden beneath a service cap. She carried a tray of wine glasses, her expression perfectly professional. "That's very thoughtful," Kale said, playing along. "What would you recommend?" "The private dining room has its own power supply," she said, her voice carrying the slightest emphasis on certain words. "Much more, ... stable." Vex's eyes narrowed as he studied the server. "I don't remember seeing you earlier. I worked the late shift, sir. Kitchen staff." Lyrics's accent had shifted subtly, becoming more provincial. "We don't usually interact with the dining room guests." "Show me your identification," Vex demanded. Lyrics reached into her uniform pocket, but instead of producing identification, she knocked over the tray of wine glasses. The crash was tremendous, and in the moment of distraction, she pressed something into Kale's hand, a small device that felt warm against his palm. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, dropping to her knees to collect the broken glass. "How clumsy of me." Vex was already moving, pulling out a weapon, but Lyrics was faster. She threw a handful of glass shards at the nearest agent, then rolled behind an overturned table. The restaurant erupted into chaos as the other diners realized they were caught in the middle of a firefight. "Lyrics Vandera," Vex called out, his weapon trained on her hiding spot. "Finally, we meet in person, Vex Morden." Her voice came from behind the table, but Kale could tell she was moving. "You're shorter than I expected. Surrender now, and I promise your death will be quick." "Counteroffer," Lyrics said, and suddenly she was behind a different table, her own weapon drawn. "You and your goons leave now, and I won't transmit the recordings of you admitting to mass murder." Kale felt the device in his hand vibrate slightly. Looking down, he saw it was a datapad showing a live feed of the quantum recorder's transmissions. But the feed wasn't just going to news networks, it was being broadcast directly to the hegemony's own communication channels. "Impossible," Vex snarled. "Our communications are encrypted." "Were encrypted," Lyrics corrected. "Turns out, your security isn't as good as you thought. Right now, every hegemony facility in the sector is receiving a live feed of this conversation, including the parts where you admitted to framing innocent business leaders and manufacturing illegal combat drugs." Kale could see Vex's face contorting with rage and growing panic. The enforcer was realizing that his carefully orchestrated plan was collapsing around him. "You're bluffing," Vex said, but his voice lacked conviction. The device in Kale's hand chimed softly. A message appeared on the screen. "Hegemony command to Moradin. Abort mission immediately. Return to base for debriefing." Kale held up the device so Vex could see it. "I don't think she's bluffing." Vex's expression shifted from anger to something far more dangerous: desperation. "You have no idea what you've done. The hegemony will never stop hunting you. We'll find you, your families, everyone you've ever cared about." "Maybe," Lyrics said, emerging from cover with her weapon still trained on the agent. "But first, they'll have to deal with the evidence we've gathered. Chemical signatures proving you poisoned the wine. Holographic records of you admitting to terrorist activities. Financial data showing the Nectar 9 operation. And," Kale added, standing slowly, "testimony from the air to one of the sector's most powerful corporations. The consortium has business relationships with 17 colonial governments. When I tell them what the hegemony has been doing, your expansion is finished." Vex looked around the restaurant, calculating his options. His agents were outnumbered by witnesses. The mission was compromised, and his superiors were already calling for his retreat. But Kale could see the madness in his eyes, the desperation of a man who knew his failure would mean his own death. "If I can't have the consortium," Vex said, raising his weapon toward Kale, "then no one can." The shot came from an unexpected direction. Torvin Blacksteel, disguised as a maintenance worker, had entered through the service corridor. His precision shot took Vex in the shoulder, spinning the enforcer around and sending his weapon flying. "Sir," Torvin said, moving to secure the fallen weapon, "I thought you might need backup." The remaining hegemony agents, seeing their leader down and the mission compromised, began retreating toward the exits. But Lyrics was already moving, her own weapon trained on the nearest agent. "I don't think so," she said. "You're all staying right here until Colonial Security arrives." "You can't hold us," one agent protested. "We have diplomatic immunity." "You forfeited that when you admitted to terrorism," Kale said, his voice cold with fury. "You murdered thousands of innocent people. Diplomatic immunity doesn't cover genocide." If summoned by his words, the restaurant's main entrance burst open. Colonial security forces poured in, their weapons drawn and their movements coordinated. Leading them was Director Nix Stellaroos, the head of New Viridian's intelligence service. "Mr. Torian," Director Stellaroos said, her voice crisp with authority. "We received your transmission. Colonial Command has issued arrest warrants for all hegemony personnel on charges of terrorism, murder, and corporate espionage." Vex, clutching his wounded shoulder, looked up at her with disbelief. "You can't be serious. The hegemony has treaties with every major power in the sector." "Had treaties," Director Stellaris corrected. "As of 30 minutes ago, the Colonial Alliance has declared those treaties null and void. The evidence you've provided has been transmitted to all member worlds. The hegemony is now considered a hostile entity." Kale felt a wave of satisfaction as the implications hit him. The quantum recorder hadn't just captured evidence, it had triggered a diplomatic revolution. The hegemony's carefully constructed web of legitimate business relationships was unraveling in real time. "This isn't over," Vex snarled as security forces moved to arrest him. "The hegemony has resources you can't imagine. We'll be back." "Maybe," Lyric said, stepping forward to look down at the fallen enforcer. "But you won't be leading them." As the hegemony agents were led away in restraints, Kale found himself alone with Lyrics for the first time since the crisis began. The restaurant was empty now, except for security personnel collecting evidence and the cleanup crew dealing with the broken glass. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" Lyrics was removing her disguise, shaking out her red hair. "For saving my life. For trusting me with the truth. For being nothing like what I thought you were." Kale looked out at the city lights below. "I owe you an apology. You owe me nothing. I'm the one who deceived you, even if it was for good reasons." She joined him at the window. "Besides, you saved my life too. If you hadn't believed me, hadn't helped me gather the evidence, ... We make a good team," Kale said. "We do." Lyric smiled, but he could see exhaustion in her eyes. "The question is, what happens now? The hegemony is wounded, but they're not dead. They'll regroup, find new tactics. Then we'll be ready for them." Kale's voice carried a determination he hadn't felt in years. "The consortium has resources, contacts, influence. We can coordinate with other mining operations, share intelligence, build a real resistance network." A resistance network led by a mining mogul and a dead planet's last scientist, Lyrics mused. "The hegemony won't see that coming." Director approached them, her expression grave. "Mr. Torian, Ms. Vandara, we need to discuss security arrangements. The hegemony will almost certainly attempt retaliation." "What do you recommend?" Kale asked. "Protective custody, at least until we can assess the threat level. The hegemony has sleeper agents throughout the sector. We're still identifying them." Kale looked at Lyrics, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. Protective custody meant safety, but it also meant isolation. It meant letting others fight the battle they'd started. "Thank you, Director, but I think we'll handle our own security," Kale said. "Sir, with respect, this isn't a corporate boardroom dispute. These people are killers. So are we, apparently." Kale's smile was grim. "Besides, hiding won't help the people still trapped in hegemony mining operations. They need to know that someone is fighting back." Director Stellaris studied them both for a long moment. "You're planning something." "We're planning to finish what we started," Lyric said. "The hegemony has been operating in the shadows for too long. It's time to drag them into the light." "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Kale and Lyrics exchanged glances. The plan was already forming in their minds, built on the foundation of trust they'd established through fire and blood. "We're going to steal their secrets," Kale said. "Every black site, every illegal operation, every corporate murder they've committed. We're going to expose it all. And then," Lyrics added, "we're going to help their victims fight back." Director Stellaris shook her head. "You're talking about a war." "The war already started," Kale replied. "The hegemony declared it when they murdered innocent people for corporate profits. We're just changing the terms of engagement." As they left the restaurant, walking out into the cool night air of New Viridian, Kale realized that his life had been fundamentally transformed. 24 hours ago, he'd been a wealthy businessman, concerned mainly with profit margins and market share. Now he was a revolutionary, committed to bringing down one of the most powerful corporate entities in the galaxy, and he couldn't be happier about it. "One question," he said to Lyrics as they waited for their transport. "What's that?" "When this is all over, when we've brought down the hegemony and freed their victims, what then?" Lyrics was quiet for a moment, looking up at the stars. "I don't know. I've been focused on revenge for so long. I'm not sure what comes after justice. Maybe we could find out together." She turned to look at him, surprise flickering across her features. "Kale ... I know it's complicated. I know we have a war to fight first. But when it's over ... double quotes, he shrugged. "I'd like to see who we are when we're not running for our lives." Lyrics' smile was soft, genuine, nothing like the calculated expressions she'd worn as a socialite. "I'd like that too." Their transport arrived, and as they climbed aboard, Kale caught a glimpse of their reflection in the window. They looked like what they were, survivors fighters. Two people who'd found each other in the midst of chaos and discovered something worth protecting. The hegemony had made a critical error in their calculations. They'd assumed that wealth and power made people weak, that comfort bred complacency. They'd never considered that prosperity could also breed responsibility, that privilege could become a weapon in the hands of those willing to use it for justice. They were about to learn otherwise. The war for the Outer Rim was just beginning, and humanity had found its champions in the most unlikely places, a mining executive and a scientist from a dead world, united by deception and forged by truth. The hegemony had tried to destroy them both. Instead, they'd created something far more dangerous: hope. 6 months after the confrontation at the Celestial Dining Hall, the hegemony's empire was crumbling. The evidence Kale and Lyrics had gathered had triggered a cascade of revelations that rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. Mining colonies declared independence, corporate partners severed ties, and government officials, who'd been bought with hegemony credits, found themselves facing criminal charges. But the real blow came from an unexpected source. "Kale, you need to see this," Lyrics called from her laboratory aboard the Vindication, the modified cargo vessel that had become their mobile command center. In the months since their partnership began, she'd transformed the ship's cargo holds into a sophisticated intelligence-gathering facility. Kale found her staring at a holographic display showing the hegemony's internal communication network. The data streams were fragmenting, showing the telltale signs of a system under extreme stress. What am I looking at? He asked. A revolution. Lyric's voice carried a mixture of satisfaction and amazement. The hegemony's own workers are rising up, mining facilities, processing plants, even their military bases. They're all going dark. The display showed red markers spreading across the galaxy's spiral arms, each one representing a hegemony facility that had ceased reporting to Central Command. But these weren't external attacks, they were internal collapses. It started on Kepler 442b, Lyrics continued, one of their largest mining operations. The workers found our broadcasts about the Nectar 9 program and realized they'd been producing the drugs that were used to control their own families on other worlds. Kale studied the spreading pattern of rebellion. How many facilities? Over 300 so far, and the number's growing every hour. The hegemony's corporate structure is predicated on centralized control. They can't function when their own people stop following orders, and the hegemony's response, Lyrics' expression, darkened. They're deploying their remaining military assets to restore order. But here's the thing. Kayla, most of their military commanders are also reading our intelligence reports. They're learning what their organization has really been doing, eh? Communication alert chimed from the bridge. Torvin's voice crackled through the intercom. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Hegemony Command. It's addressed to both of you personally. Kale and Lyrics exchanged glances. In 6 months of warfare, the Hegemony had never attempted direct communication with them. This was either a trap or a sign of desperation. Put it through, Kale said. The holographic display shifted to show a figure Kale didn't recognize it. Elderly woman with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. She wore the uniform of a Hegemony High Administrator, but her expression carried none of the arrogance Kale had come to expect from their leadership. Mr. Torian, Ms. Vandera, she said, her voice carefully controlled. I am Administrator Zara Velthorn, Acting Director of Hegemony Operations. I believe it's time we talked. I'm listening, Kale said cautiously. The Hegemony's Board of Directors has voted to offer you a negotiated settlement, a complete withdrawal from the Outer Rim territories in exchange for an end to hostilities. Lyrics stepped forward, her voice sharp with suspicion. What's the catch? No catch. We're prepared to provide full restitution to the families of those killed in our operations, environmental rehabilitation for damaged worlds, and complete access to our medical facilities for treatment of Nectar 9 addiction. Administrator Velthorn paused. We're also prepared to surrender those responsible for the worst atrocities for trial by colonial courts. Kale felt his jaw drop. This wasn't just a surrender, it was a complete capitulation. Why now? Because you've accomplished something we thought impossible, Mr. Torian. You've made us irrelevant. Velthorn's smile was bitter. Our entire business model was based on controlling information, manipulating markets, and exploiting the isolation of rim worlds. You've connected those worlds, shared our secrets, and given our own people reason to rebel. We no longer have an empire to defend. You're admitting defeat. Lyrics asked, disbelief clear in her voice. I'm admitting reality. The hegemony, as it existed, is finished. The question now is whether we can salvage something from the wreckage that might actually do some good in the galaxy. Kale studied the administrator's face, looking for signs of deception. But all he saw was exhaustion and something that might have been genuine remorse. There's one more thing, Velthorn continued. The board has also voted to dissolve the hegemony entirely. Our remaining assets will be transferred to a humanitarian trust administered by the Colonial Alliance. Our ships, our facilities, our research, all of it will be used to help rebuild the worlds we damaged. And what happens to people like you? Kale asked. Those of us who participated in the atrocities will face justice. Those who were simply following orders will be given the chance to make amends through service to the rebuilding effort. Velthorn's expression was resolute. We've caused too much suffering to simply walk away, but we can at least try to repair some of the damage. Lyrics moved to stand beside Kale, her hand finding his. What about Vex Moradin and his agents? Already in custody. They'll be transferred to colonial authorities for trial. Velthorn looked directly at Lyrax. I want you to know, Ms. Vandara, that I've read the reports about Thyros Prime. What happened to your world was unconscionable. I cannot undo that damage, but I can ensure it never happens again. The transmission ended, leaving Kale and Lyrax alone in the laboratory. For several minutes, neither spoke, both trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Do you believe her? Lyrax finally asked. I think she's telling the truth about the hegemony being finished, Kale said. Whether she's genuine about making amends, that remains to be seen. It's more than I ever dared hope for, Lyrax admitted. When I started this, I thought the best I could accomplish was exposing their crimes. I never imagined we could actually bring them down. We didn't bring them down, Kale corrected. We just gave their victims the tools to free themselves. Over the following weeks, the hegemony's surrender proved genuine. Military forces laid down their arms, corporate executives submitted to colonial authority, and the massive apparatus of oppression that had dominated the Outer Rim for decades simply stopped. But the real victory came in the form of smaller, more personal triumphs. Mining colonies established democratic governments. Families separated by corporate policies were reunited. Research into environmental rehabilitation began on dozens of damaged worlds and on a small space station orbiting the ruins of Thyros Prime. Two people stood looking down at a world that was slowly beginning to heal. The atmospheric processors are working, Lyrax said, her voice filled with wonder. The crystal forests are actually starting to regrow. Kale put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. How long before it's habitable again? Decades. Maybe longer. But it's happening. She leaned into him, her voice soft with emotion. My people won't see it, but their children's children might. Their children's children will know that someone fought for them, Kale said. That someone refused to let their sacrifice be forgotten. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise paint the damaged world in shades of gold and green. In the distance, Kale could see the construction platforms where refugee ships were being converted into orbital habitats. The survivors of Thyros Prime would have a home again, even if it wasn't the one they'd lost. So, Lyrax said eventually, what do we do now? The war's over. The bad guys are defeated. Justice has been served. Now we figure out who we are when we're not fighting for survival, Kale replied. I seem to remember someone promising to help. Me with that? Lyrax turned in his arms, her green eyes bright with mischief. I seem to remember someone thinking I was a gold digger. In my defense, you were very convincing. I had a good teacher. My father always said the best way to hide your true nature is to pretend to be exactly what people expect you to be. What? Would he think of you now? Lyrax's smile was radiant. I think he'd be proud. We saved a lot of worlds, Kale. We gave people hope. We did more than that, Kale said, his voice serious. We proved that the powerful have a responsibility to protect the powerless. That wealth and influence are tools, not entitlements. Very philosophical for a mining mogul. I learned from the best revolutionary I know. They kissed then, surrounded by the light of a healing star and the promise of a better future. Around them, the galaxy was changing, shaped by the choices they'd made and the courage they'd found in each other. The hegemony had made one final, fatal error in their calculations. They'd assumed that two people couldn't change the course of history. They'd been spectacularly wrong, in the end. It hadn't been armies or fleets that brought down the corporate empire. It had been truth, shared between two people who'd learned to trust each other. It had been the simple recognition that some things, justice, freedom, love were worth fighting for. The galaxy was vast, and there would always be new threats, new challenges, new injustices to confront. But humanity had learned something important in the ruins of the hegemony's empire. They were stronger together than apart. and no force in the universe could stand against people who refused to surrender their hope. Kale Torian had thought lyrics. Vandara was a gold digger. She'd turned out to be something far more precious, a partner, a revolutionary, and the love of his life, and together, they'd changed the galaxy. The end in the years that followed. The Torian Vandara Foundation would become one of the galaxy's most powerful forces for positive change, using the wealth of the former consortium and the rebuilt resources of Thyros Prime to support struggling colonies and oppose corporate tyranny wherever it arose. Their love story became legend, but their real legacy was the network of free worlds. They helped create a testament to the power of two people who refused to accept that suffering was inevitable. The hegemony's motto had been order through strength. The Foundation's was simpler. Together, we rise. And rise they did.